Our final guest for this session is a wonderful friend of the Henri Nouwen Society. After more than 20 years working in fundraising, Derek Bechtel founded RDK Philanthropy, and their mission is to grow the impact of faith-based individuals and entities through expert-level philanthropic services with a focus on the values of integrity, humility, and generosity. Welcome to A Spirituality of Fundraising, Derek.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you.
It's so great to have you. Derek, you've developed an analogy of a tree, and that's become really a core part of the fundraising teaching and consulting that you do. In fact, the name RDK Philanthropy is even based on that analogy. Would you tell us about that?
Oh, I'd love to. Well, to tell you the response you're looking for, I'm going to give you a little background so that it makes sense. I worked for the Boy Scouts for 21 years, half of it in Arizona, half of it in Texas. And that last half, I was working with a lot of high net worth individuals. I was a philanthropic advisor working on a project nationally. And what I found was, as I was working with these high net worth individuals, these families, that I was in a specific role that was pretty rare, and there was a high trust level that these people had for me. And as I would visit with them, I actually found that a lot of their families were being destroyed by wealth. And I had no experience with that before. And I started having some heartbreak, and I thought, I'm fundraising, and a lot of what I was doing was to help me so that I could get to my next promotion and help my family. And all of a sudden, I realized I'm not here for me anymore. The Lord's put me in this role to work with families and help them to lay up treasures in heaven. And so that's as succinct as a summary as I could give you. So, which now leads to what I learned. I had a heart change. The Holy Spirit worked on me pretty good and said, "You're not here for you anymore. You're actually here to help these families to use their wealth for kingdom things." And so I was starting to be asked, how do you fundraise? And all these new CEOs for the Boy Scouts would come out and hear my presentation. And I said, Lord, how do you want me to teach this? And what he gave me was something I actually really love is a nature analogy. And that is the tree. And so it's so simple. Most fundraisers approach trees and they see the fruit. And they say, I want a little bit of that. You've got so much. Could you just give me a little, because I need, my nonprofit needs. We've heard that a lot. Well, I didn't feel that way anymore. I said, I'm not approaching a tree because there's a lot of fruit. I'm approaching a tree because that's a person. And what do they want to accomplish? And most fundraisers who approach a tree and look at the fruit, they have an axe. And they go up to that tree and they hack a little bit. They get a little fruit, and then they leave because they need to go on to the next person, and they don't have a relationship. This is so common. Our development teams around the country are overworked, and they just have to get to their goals. And so I said, that's not who I am anymore. I don't have a heart for that. What I do have a heart for is to change my axe into a watering can. I'm going to water the root system. I don't even know what the root system is. How do I know? I've got to get to know the people and what they care about. I'm going to help their tree to grow stronger and be more fruitful. And then by doing that, I'm loving my neighbor as myself. I'm not being transactional. I'm having a relational walk with them and what they want to accomplish and finding alignment for their philanthropy. So that's the analogy of the tree. It's so simple. It's hard to do. Fundraisers often can't get to that point because they have to get on to the next thing. and the next fundraiser, the next event, they don't have the chance to sit there and say, well, what do you care about and how can I help you? But as soon as you do that, you actually have alignment and you get bigger gifts, and it's a win-win. So there's a quick overview for you, Wendy.
Thanks, Derek. You already alluded to it, but your faith is clearly such a significant part of your work in this area of fundraising. And in a
Mm-hmm.
previous conversation, you were telling me a little bit about your practices of prayer and journaling for all those that you meet with. I wonder if you would tell us a bit more about that.
What I learned was this is a faith walk. And I started going and helping with asks, and I would journal. I would actually take a journal and say, Lord, this is who we are going to visit. Would you help open that door and open their heart? Lord, during the meeting, Lord, help me to know what to think, say, and do. And then after the meeting, Lord, will you help them to know if they give a gift or not? It became a complete faith walk, and it really became out of my hands. I was just obedient to pray. And fundraising can be an extremely difficult job where you feel like you're in control when really we have very little control. All we can really control is being obedient, making the ask, and then trusting that the Lord's working on their heart. Similar to when we share the gospel and then we think we're converting somebody, but that's not what's happening. The Holy Spirit's working on their heart. So fundraising is very similar in that regard. So journaling and praying is absolutely part of my everyday life in fundraising.
Now, you started out by saying you've had the opportunity to build relationships with those with significant net worth. And
Mm-hmm.
in your analogy of the tree, you spoke about some of the poverty that you encountered there. And Henri Nouwen speaks about that in A Spirituality of Fundraising too. Can you tell us, how do you begin to make a spiritual connection in those kinds of relationships? I would think that many of us might feel a certain level of intimidation of connecting with and relating to people who are probably at a very different social strata and financial portfolio than we are. Can you tell us about just how you've come into those relational contexts and listened to the Spirit of God and been able to be a blessing?
Sure, this is quite a process of going through and being brave. You know, being around people of 500 million, $1 billion net worth can be very intimidating. And a lot of times those people are so good at what they do. You may have 10 minutes with them and they will understand exactly what you know and what you don't know and if you should continue speaking or not. It is quite an experience. So, in order to be ready for something like that, it's very important that we know ourselves. I spent a couple years in my role as a philanthropic advisor understanding what I cared about, what I thought about money, what I thought about people with money, and then what do I care about? Ultimately, what came down to was I don't care about any of the physical things that people have. And I was around a lot of amazing things, very very expensive penthouses, jets that can fly through across the ocean without needing to refuel, amazing planes, cars, etc. And you might imagine that there could be jealousy, there could be covetousness, there could be things that you just feel like, what? Why am I not in this position? I had that a little bit, but I really was centered because I came from a very, balanced Christian home where we didn't have a lot, but we didn't want a lot. But when I started seeing that everything, I realized this is a whole level of social and financial strata that I'm not used to. So I really just paid attention to what I didn't know, and I watched what other people did and how they acted so that I could fit into that social structure. And then from there, I didn't have any expectations that they were going to give to me. Now that's key because a lot of times people go and they visit with someone of ultra high net worth. Those people can sniff out immediately if it's for you or if it's collaborative. What I mean by that is if I'm there for me, it only takes a few moments and they know it. If I'm there for them and collaboration for us in how I speak and what I'm offering, then they're ready to listen. And there may be times that they just are overwhelmed and they have too many people asking them for different things, and you just back off. You give them space. If you treat them like a tree that you want to water, they feel different. They feel trust. They feel like this is something that maybe we can work together. I took a guy out yesterday for lunch. He pays for everybody. And I said, you paid for me last time. May I just pay for it this time? Now he could pay for the whole restaurant, but I'm paying for him to show him respect and love and care. And he said, nobody ever does that. So those are a couple of examples of how I've learned how to work with people and how to prepare. It really comes down to how comfortable we feel about ourselves and how we react to situations. And Henry brought that up in his spirituality fundraising, and Nathan Ball had the worksheet section. What do you think about money? What do you think about things? And ultimately, all that's going to burn away. So you really shouldn't care about it anyway. All we look at is how we can align with those people to do what they want to do. And it's a win-win situation. It's actually win-win-win. It's win for the nonprofit, it's win for the philanthropists, and it's a win for the kingdom, which is what God wants us to fulfill, the Great Commission. We've got to catalyze that with some resources.
Derek, in your work now, you have the opportunity to meet with families with faith commitments. Can you share with us some of the ways that you guide and advise them to really understand where their passions and where their sense of mission fit with their giving priorities?
I'd love to. I think this is a great question, and it's very important for our philanthropists that are tuning in and also for people who are working with philanthropists. So, this is very important. Thank you. What I've learned is when I was with the Boy Scouts, all answers pointed to the Boy Scouts. Meaning, if I met with somebody, the project that I would offer is a Boy Scout project. It's a national or local. And then I had an advisor come along to me and say, even though we work for the Boy Scouts, what if the people we talk to are more interested in Boys and Girls Club? I'm going to send them there. And I thought, that is very noble. And now I'm actually a free agent, which means I work with all different groups. And so I feel what he shared. When I visit with someone who has the capacity of making a gift, any gift, I will ask them, do you have a mission statement for your philanthropy? And I'm finding that most people don't have that. There are the rare few that have a personal foundation, a family trust, a donor advised fund, or they work with a community foundation, or they just have some advisors with them. But that's pretty rare. I'm finding that a lot of people just don't know what they're going to be giving to until someone's in front of them and says, what about this? What about this? And so I would advise when I visit with families to take a moment and say, what do you really care about? What are those values that you want to pass on to your kids? What do you want to pass on as a project that you can all work on together? If you don't have a family, maybe it's you and your spouse, what do you want to do together that's a legacy project?
You mentioned generosity. Derek, I wonder, how have you seen growth in generosity change people? What are some of
Mm.
the fruits that you see in people's lives as they are freed up to become more generous and maybe less tied to the material or less tied to accumulating things?
When I've met people who have closed fists, they are constantly upset or angst. They may have a moment of joy, but it's always closed. No, I can't. But then I've met people who have open hands. There's a beautiful man in Mexico City who just turned 101 years old. And I'm going to use his name because everybody should know him. Wayne Myers. Wayne Myers has spent his whole life giving. He has a lifestyle of giving. That's what he tells people. It's a lifestyle. Once you start, you can't stop. He wants to just please the Lord and just give, give, give. Well, this man has put more than 6,000 roofs on churches all throughout Mexico. And whenever he receives gifts, he gives away. And he is one of the most generous people I've ever met. And to answer your question, he's a happy man. You would think he'd be nervous. He just got this money in, and now, well, I've got to pay these bills. And that. No, he doesn't even think about it. He just starts giving. He is one of the most generous people I've ever met, and he's so happy and fulfilled in life.
It's always a great value to be able to share from biblical sources and tell those stories to our children and our children's children. And you get the opportunity to share from the scriptures with families of faith that you meet with as you advise about their philanthropy. What are some of the examples that you have just found to be so life-giving?
Yeah, this is a great topic I love. And I would say it's not just families of faith, it's also the nonprofits and for profits that I consult. And so this is what I've learned. Moses was commanded by the Lord in Exodus 25 to go do the first fundraiser. He actually said, go and ask the people for all the things to build the tabernacle. And I think about that and I think God likes to have us come together in faith to work with each other with the things he's given us. And so it took Moses to go ask, would you all put together some things so we can build this tabernacle? We're looking for gold and silver and purple and let's build it. And so that to me was the very first fundraiser. And then I learned there's some really key verses in the Bible like Malachi 3:10. It talks about bringing the tithes to the storehouse and test me in this and see if I won't open up the windows and just flood you with more blessing. And so then I'm thinking, well, the storehouse is pretty important to put some funds into. And then I'm looking at Luke 6:38, where we learn that give and it will be given unto you. Well, if I'm not a giver, that verse might stop me in my tracks a moment and say, you mean when I give, it'll be given back to me? What does that mean? Well, the verse further goes on to say, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing into your lap. For the measure you give, you get back. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to give $5, you get $5. But a lot of people actually find that when they give $5, along comes another $5. But it could also be along comes a job opportunity, or along comes a healing, or along comes whatever it is. It's a blessing. I just love that there's generosity in the Bible. You can go on and on. And one of my very favorite guiding verses, which was a huge epiphany revelation to me, is Philippians 4:17. And I love just all of Philippians. It's so good. But Philippians 4:17 gets overlooked. And it is Paul thanking his people for giving him some missionary money. And he's going through Macedonia, and it's helpful to have some extra money to get through and pay for things. Well, Paul said, it's not the gift that I seek, it's the fruit that abounds to your account. Ultimately, Paul got it. He said, you could give me all the money you want, and you would think I'm the one blessed, but it's really you. It's the fruit that abounds to your account. You're the one that's blessed. So keep on giving and know that you're going to be getting all this fruit. So thank you for asking that question. Those are just a few verses that are just huge about generosity in the Bible.
Well, it strikes me, Derek, as you share those, how deeply you've internalized them. And
Yeah.
this series has been a lot about the spiritual practices that undergird our work as those who raise funds, those who give funds, that would truly be a collaborative participation with what God has set out to do. And it just strikes me again and again and again that it is the practice of these things, embedding it deep within our being, so it simply becomes part of the fabric of who we are, that it comes naturally in conversation, that we're not being strategic necessarily, we're simply giving out of the overflow ourselves as we're in those situations to be a blessing. So again, Derek Bechtel, thanks so much for being with us, and thank you for being such a wonderful friend to the Henri Nouwen Society.
Thanks, Wendy.